Welcome, everyone. We are waiting 2 to 3 minutes before starting the webinar to accommodate for the rest of the attendees who are in the process of connecting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. Few reminders before starting. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. Today's webinar is a 60-minute session, and during this time, please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window by clicking on the Ask Question button. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. We often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. In the event, if the answer was not provided, or if you may have additional questions post this event, please don't hesitate to raise them on our Azure Sentinel forum at aka.ms/Azure Sentinel community. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask a question. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. So please, you can do that at aka.ms/security-webinar feedback. While you're there, please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, where you can sign up at aka.ms/security private preview. And while you're there, you can request features, give feedback, review our product roadmaps, attend in-person events, or join webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. We have a great topic to cover today. Kara Cole will present how to tackle identity with Azure Sentinel. Kara is a senior PM of our Azure Sentinel CXE team with deep expertise on the topic. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to her. Kara, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Valan. Okay, so our topic today is tackling identity with Azure Sentinel. Before we begin, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that on our tech community site, we do have a lot of blogs as well as previously recorded webinars that will help you get started with Azure Sentinel. So if you're looking for details on, for instance, how to set up a Ceph connector or how to connect data sources, that's definitely going to be your great starting place. The goal of this webinar is to actually focus on use cases. So we're trying to expand on not only out-of-the-box use cases that are relevant to identity, but introduce 3 new use cases to you that are not out of the box, but we put them together to provide you some different perspective on how you can address identity challenges with Azure Sentinel. So before we get into the actual use cases, I want to frame this a little bit by talking about identity as a whole. So identity is at the center of security. If you think about all of your data breaches or any types of questions that are going to be asked of whether or not you were breached, they're going to be probably identity related. So you're going to have questions like, who did this? Where did they come from? What permissions did they have? What did they have access to? What else could have been accessed? Were we compromised? These questions have been attempted to be answered with lots of different security products in lots of different ways. And there's industries, entire industries of products that have been built around solving this challenge of identity being at the center of security. There's UEBA products for user entity and behavior analytics. You have endpoint detection and response focusing on user data. You have SIMs that are supplementing log data with user identity information. You have identity and access management. So there's a number of solutions that are out there that are all tackling identity challenges. And one of the great things about SIM is it being the central collection of all of those different logs, as well as being able to provide additional context through whether it's files or different resources within your environment. They can help supplement those logs and provide a better context around what was done and who did what. Getting into some statistics and why identity is important. What you're seeing on the screen are statistics from Verizon's data breach reports. So cybersecurity attacks have been a major challenge for IT organizations. Even the largest organizations and reputable financial organizations and governments are not immune to constant threats. The nature of cybersecurity attacks have been changing as attackers find new intelligent ways to breach networks. Specifically targeting credentials. So rather than using virus or malware software, most of the time attackers are hiding under the identity of an innocent user. So the first statistic you see here is that 81% of hacks and cybersecurity attacks are traced back to a lost, weak, or compromised user's credentials. So these credentials are vulnerable because passwords are vulnerable. 73% of passwords are duplicates. We all have that challenge of having multiple passwords. And so in order to simplify our process and be more productive, we tend to use the same passwords over and over again. And along those same lines of being productive, 80% of employees are actually using non-approved apps for work, so SaaS apps, because they're trying to be productive. So those applications might make them more productive, but there's also a security risk because security isn't going to be forefront in the mind. So outside of those data breach reports and the statistics you see here, Microsoft has also seen a 300% increase in identity attacks over the past year. So we have statistics that support this too. So multi-factor authentication is something that can really help reduce the risk of identity compromise by 99.9%, but not everybody is implementing MFA. So as organizations' employees are moving to the public cloud, the security strategy needs to start with a strong, protected single identity at the center of the business. Not all your information's on-prem anymore. Not everything's in the private cloud anymore. So you need to protect and build your environment around identity being at the center of the control plane. So as identity becomes a new control plane, it safeguards our core assets on-prem and in the cloud. Having a tool like Azure AD is critical for balancing security and productivity in organizations and is serving for that first line of defense. And as such, this becomes an important data source for SIEM in providing the analytics around SIEM. So let's talk a little bit about, now that was the problem, and understanding how important identity is with regards to security. But let's look at how we can tackle identity with a SIEM. The first piece is to understand the use cases that you need to address. So I have a few listed here, but this is definitely by far not an exclusive list. All right, so management's going to ask you, what are you doing to stay on top of identity? You have to probably start with a use case. We help you out here with Sentinel because we have a number of use cases that we provided out of the box. But again, we're giving you the tools to be able to create your own as well. So how do you start attacking these use cases? The first thing is you need to understand what questions you have to answer. So every one of these use cases is going to have required data. So not all your data is going to be coming in through logs. Some of it be coming in from other contexts as well. So you need to understand users, permissions, who should be accessing what, and making sure that the SIEM has the information it needs to be able to successfully identify when something is a concern. Additionally, you need to make sure that the data sources are being added to your environment so that we're getting those log data sources. This list here is, again, it's not all exclusive, but it gives you a list of some of the data sources that we monitor out of the box and other data sources that are going to be good for providing identity information. And then the last piece here is understanding which attributes and fields are going to give you the information that you need when you are building your analytics. So let's take a look at the out-of-the-box identity analytics that we're providing within Azure Sentinel. One of the best ways to just start to look at some of those identity analytics is going to be by filtering on the tactics for initial access. This is one of the MITRE tactics, and initial access is basically looking for adversaries that are trying to access your network. This is, as you can see here, this list of 20 different analytics that we provide out of the box. Not all of them are query-based. We also do have a machine learning behavioral analytic around anomalous SSH login detection. And again, not all of them are also Azure Active Directory. We have a number of different data sources that we can use to provide log data, as well as machine learning, to answer these questions that are proposed by these use cases. Just as a side note, all of these use cases are built by Microsoft's Mystic team. So we have them all vetted and created for you out of the box. You just need to go into your rule templates and activate them to apply them in your environment. So we have 4 use cases that we're going to dive into. The first one is going to be actually one that is out of the box. So it's log into a disabled account. So if we look at those 4 steps that I mentioned before, the first thing is understanding what use cases that you want to address. So our first use case here is log into a disabled account. The second thing is you have to understand what questions you need to answer in order to address those use cases. So for us, we need to understand which accounts are disabled. So we have a event ID 50057, which identifies user accounts have been disabled. We also, by the way, have this one on our GitHub. So all of our default analytics are available from our community site on our GitHub, so you have the opportunity to go and access them there. So we're looking for IP addresses that had a failed attempts to sign into one or more disabled accounts, but they've also signed in successfully at another account. So that's really our more definitive use case that we're trying to identify. The data source that we need that's going to provide us this information is Azure AD. So this is actually quite a long analytic, so I'm going to break it down into 2 areas. The first thing that we're going to do in the first part of this query, we're going to look back 1 day, and we're going to look at sign-in logs. And the sign-in logs that we're looking for are for ones that are attempting to log into a disabled account. So there's a 50057 again, the event ID, and it's looking for user accounts disabled. And based on these entries, of these log entries, we're going to look for the IP addresses that attempted to log into these disabled accounts. In the second half of this query, what we're going to do is we have this list of IPs now that we're going to basically consider suspicious because they had tried to log into a disabled account. And we're going to go ahead and map them, if you will, to sign-in activities. I'm sorry, somebody is not muted. Okay. We're going to map these to sign. That's okay. Sign-in activities that are that have been successful. So basically, you're taking the IPs that tried to log into disabled accounts, and you're going to map them to sign-in activities that were successful. So there is an extra criteria in here where we're basically saying anybody that successfully signed in to more than 100 distinct user accounts. So basically, it's a dynamic IP that's been assigned, and we've had more than 100 different distinct user accounts. We're going to consider those safe, but we're looking for those IPs that have attempted to authenticate to a disabled user and have had a successful sign into another account. So based on this query, if you run this query, and again, this is one that you actually can go ahead and do yourself because it's already in your system, we came back with a result set. So we have here where we can see a disabled account with Yaniv, and Security CXP Ninja, and successful account sign-in set was done by two different ones. You have Yaniv here from Microsoft as well as PC Admin. When this triggers, because you basically need to go and create the analytic, to take the template and then create the analytic from that template, then it will trigger as an incident anytime this goes. And when you go and look at your incident investigation, you'll see that there's sign-ins from IPs, and you'll see the actual IP address. So this is that same IP address logged in by two different people. You can right-click on that, and you can go and click more and see the least active accounts. And if you are expanding that, you're going to see who those two accounts were that successfully logged in under that IP address. So that is the first use case. And again, that one is out of the box. The rest of these are going to be new use cases that we're going to cover. So our next use case is going to be that we want to be alerted when users are accessing resources outside of a specified time range. So log in outside of working hours. And the questions that you need to know here is you need to know what your working hours are. So basically, give a defined time range. You also need to know which users you want to monitor. So in this example that we're going to use an AD group, and we're going to basically look at our help desk AD group as being the ones that we want to monitor. And the reason why we want to monitor them is because they have strict shifts, they have a predictable schedule, and if there's exceptions, we can deal with them in watch lists, but basically we will have a defined group of users that we have a predictable login rate, and we want to see things that are outside of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a logic app that pulls members of that AD group into a log analytic table. And once that information's in the log analytic table, we can create an analytic rule that will trigger an incident anytime a member of that group signs in outside of those defined time range. So here is just a screenshot of our AD group. So that we have a help desk AD group with 3 members. We have Christopher, Yaniv, and Kara. And then we can actually start to see some results. So we have a playbook that we're going to create. And this playbook, again, is going to go and pull in the members from that AD group, and it's going to log everything. So every entry is going to be contained in this user watch list and log analytics. The query that we're going to write here, first of all, we need to define a time zone. So let's just say our time zone that we're concerned with is anything outside of Friday at 6 and Monday at 7 are things that we have to be concerned with. That's not when our help desk people are working. They're working, again, between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. So if we break down the analytic, we can look at the sign-in logs, and we can look at when those sign-in logs occurred. So we have here a day starting definitions, Mondays 1, Tuesdays 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so as you can see. And we can also look at the time zones. So we're basically saying that if they're logging in if it's not between Monday through Friday and between 7 and 18 p.m., then that's going to be our concern. Those are the ones that we want to look at. So we're going to then join the result set here, which is, again, anything outside of Monday through Friday and anything outside of 7 to 6 p.m. Then we want to go and join that information with our user watch list to see if any of those logins are around our help desk users. And if they are, then that's where we want to actually trigger an incident. So when we run this log, or this analytic in our logs, we actually do see that there is a result set here with me being the culprit. And what it would look like in our analytics is you basically can create a login outside of working hours. We can provide it a description. We have our rule query that we just created. You can define how often you want to be able to go in and run that. Okay. So the third use case that we have is impossible travel, reducing false positives. So this one I want to take a few minutes to kind of explain. Today we have a really great tool called MCAS that will give you impossible travel results. But there are times where maybe providing more context can eliminate some false positives. So why might you get a false positive with MCAS? An example might be if you're on your mobile phone. Let's assume I'm a user and I am based in the US and I'm traveling to Israel and I'm surfing on my mobile phone. Sometimes I might get an IP address from my US. The provider might assign me a US-based IP. But then if I go and I connect to wireless, I might also get an IP address that's assigned to me from Israel. And if this happens within like a 5-minute time frame, that's impossible travel. I can't be in two places. I can't be in the US and Israel at the same time. So one of the things that we can do is supplement these alerts that are coming in with MCAS with additional data. And if we can provide, for instance, a list of HR approved travel plans and compare the alerts that are triggering with the list of users that have been approved for travel, we can then eliminate or reduce the number of false positives that are triggering. So how we're going to approach this is we're going to start with looking for the MCAS alerts. So MCAS is going to send us an impossible travel. We also do need to have a list of approved travel plans. So in our example, we're going to be using SharePoint just to give you a list of users. But that doesn't have to be SharePoint. It can be anything. Like if you have a database that has a list of approved travel plans, then you'll be able to point to that. We're going to create a playbook that will go ahead and pull that travel schedule into a table in Log Analytics. And then we're going to create a rule that will look for those impossible travel alerts that are being triggered by MCAS and compare them to our known travel schedule. Now, the other thing that we're going to do too is if the travel is approved, then we're going to basically close that Sentinel incident as a false positive with comments. Optionally, you also can do a playbook that will close MCAS alerts, but I don't have that one here. So we can show you the one that's going to close Sentinel. So step one, when it comes to addressing this use case, is that you need to have the supplemental information. So our SharePoint file here has the list of employees. It has the employee email address. It has a travel country, travel code, the first day of the destination and the last day at the destination. And you can see that you can add new items quite easily on the right-hand side. The one culprit I want to point out here is Megan B, because she's actually going to be my trigger, where she's traveling to Belgium between the dates of December 15th and February 26th. So she's approved for her travel. So when we create a playbook what we're going to do is once a day, go to that SharePoint site that's holding all the HR approved travel requests and pull that information in. So we're going to pull in all the countries that we're visiting, the country code, the start of the trip, the end of the trip, and who the user is. And we're going to add it to a Sentinel's log analytics workspace under a custom log named HR Travel DB. So here's the analytic. We're going to start by looking at the security alert. So the security alert table is the table that contains all of the first party alerts that are triggering. So that could be coming in from MCAS, Azure Security Center, MDATP, Azure ATP. So anything that's generating alerts and sending them to Sentinel, they'll be stored in the security alerts table. So we're looking for impossible travel activity for the last 7 days. We're also going to be looking for user, countries, country 1, country 2, where they're going to, and what time. So all that information is coming from the MCAS alert. And we're going to join this information with our table. So we have our HR travel table, and we have the information that we've already talked about in that table. So the last day, the first day, what countries they're visiting and who they were. So based on the ability to look at the alerts and compare them with the approved travel, we can see if there's anybody that triggered an alert in MCAS as being impossible travel, but yet we know it was actually not impossible because that person was meant to be there. So Megan, we know, is going to be in Belgium during this time frame. And so we can then take this and disable, or I should say, turn off the analytic or so the incident and mark it as a false positive. So how we do that, how we close that incident as a false positive is we can, as part of the analytic, you can assign a playbook to automate. And our playbook that we can automate here is close incident if it's a false positive. So when this is triggered, the playbook will go get the incident's attributes, will change the incident status to closed, and give false positive as a closed reason. And it will also then add a comment to that incident so that people will know. So if this were to happen, we would basically see that we had this impossible travel incident. We can see that it's also now closed. We see the status is closed, and the closed reason is that an analytical rule identified that impossible travel is happening outside of the known travel schedule. So we're basically saying that it was a predicted travel, and therefore we don't need to have this incident. Okay, on to our last use case. So our last use case is around, we want to look at suspicious access to a sensitive server. So we need to first understand which users logging into the servers would be suspicious and which servers do you actually want to monitor. So which ones are sensitive and which users would be allowed to have access to them, and then anything outside of that would be suspicious. So what we have here is we're going to be using a data source from Azure AD sign-in logs, but we need to provide a list of help desk users because our scenario is actually going to be the certificate authority servers. So it's basically the servers that are providing new certification keys are going to be our servers that we care about. And help desk users are the only ones that should be allowed to access them. So we're going to be able to have a list of help desk users. Now I could use my AD group that I've already provided in an earlier example, but I'm going to give you another way of being able to pull information into Azure Sentinel using a PowerShell script. And then the second thing is I need to provide a list of servers that are sensitive. So I'm going to store that information in a blob storage. And I'm going to use this external data KQL operator to keep everything in temporary, basically memory. In this scenario, we're using the external data KQL operator. We're not storing the information in log analytics. We're just going to be using it quickly for doing our poll. We're going to use a PowerShell script that pulls the members at help desk information into the log analytics table and create an analytical rule that will trigger when the incident from a non-help desk user member accesses a sensitive server. So the first thing is we need our server list. Here I have a blob storage that has a list of servers. The reason why using it in blob is good because we have like SAS key required to access information. So for our file, we have our server name, the owner, the role, whether or not this server is considered high risk, and the department that the user is participating in. So that's our server list. Our second thing is that we have external data around whitelisting of help desk users. So what I can do here is I can use a PowerShell script called upload AZ monitor log, and basically I can pull information, so import in a CSV. So I'll have a CSV file of my help desk users. I can import that information using the PowerShell script, and I can store it in my log analytics workspace. So I just need to define, if you're going to use this PowerShell script, the workspace ID, the workspace key, and basically the name of the file that you're pulling in, and where you want to store it. So storing it in the users underscore lookup is going to be my custom log where I'm going to store everything. So if I go and I look at user underscore lookup custom log, and I go and grab the last 10, then I can see all of the different users that have been populated through this process. So if I look at the analytic and I break it down into multiple steps, so what I'm going to show here is kind of a different kind of join. So before we use join to join the tables, the way that I'm doing this is a little bit different. So first we're going to look for those HD user lists. So we're going to go and look at the users in that user lookup custom log. And second thing we're going to do is access the server list. So the one thing that's different here is that we're using this external data command within Azure Sentinel and KQL. So this KQL operator, it demonstrates another way to access data in a list without pulling all the information into KQL. And why? Maybe you just want to access the data on the fly in a query, and maybe you actually don't want to store in the KQL. So this gives you the option of being able to do that. And to go and grab the information from the blob storage. And I'm going to be looking for anything in there that's a certificate management and high risk. So I'm looking at my servers that are certificate management servers and also considered high risk servers. The second part of this analytic is I'm going to look for logins. So I'm looking for user logins in my security events. And then I'm going to be looking to see if those logins are to those servers that we consider to be high risk and certificate management servers, but the usernames are not in my HD username list. So my user lookup CL. Now, if I have a trigger, and I do have one here, where I have Yaniv, who is the account. He was on this cert management computer. He logged in, but he logged into a certification server, but he was not part of my help desk group. How that might look in Azure Sentinel is right here. We have the analytic that we've created. So suspicious access to a sensitive server is our analytic. It's initial access. And then when it triggers, then we can see suspicious access to a sensitive server was triggered, and you can see the creation. So that is the summary of our 4 use cases around identity within Azure Sentinel. One thing I'd love is if you like the format of focusing on use case driven scenarios, then please let us know. And especially if there's other themes that you'd like to see outside of identity, we'd be more than happy to pull together additional use cases for new themes. And that was what I have.
Thank you, Kara. That was great. Let's see if we have some outstanding questions over here, although most of them have been answered. I think the one that came in is Sentinel backed by a team of SIEM analysts who are helping to curate and enhance the management of threats out there that benefit all Sentinel customers.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure, let me just copy and paste it here. Maybe also the rest of the team can look at it. So I'll read it to you again here just a second.
Okay, sure.
So is Sentinel backed by a team of SIEM, the Security Information and Event Management, analysts who are helping to curate and enhance the management of threats out there that benefit all Sentinel customers?
Yes, absolutely. So all of those out-of-the-box analytics are written by the Microsoft Threat Intelligence team, so our Mystic team. And that team, basically, they're experts in cyber threats and creating analytics that are going to find and identify things that you need to worry about. So the analytics that we have out of the box are all vetted and created by the Mystic team.
Great. And the next one is with our current SIEM, they have an agent to track changes to SQL databases. How does Sentinel capture activity within SQL?
So for SQL, you can, I'm not sure if it actually supports this log or Ceph. So when it comes to creating data sources, there's a couple different ways. So you can get data sources out of the box if they're out of the box supported. You can get information through syslog, you can get information through Ceph. You can also pull information in through an agent, and you can also pull information in through Logic App and APIs. So it would be a matter of understanding which one of those methods is going to be best to pull information in from SQL and get it into the log analytics table. I just don't know off the top of my head which one SQL is. If anybody knows, feel free to chime in.
Okay, great. Another good one here is if someone does create an issue for automatically emailing alerts from Sentinel, please let me know what the issue number is. This should be built in the platform, not something we have to build on our own.
Yeah, so at the moment, we're actually looking to explore different ways that we can add additional details, including the deep link and also that number. So it's just a matter of time until we actually support it. But we are looking to incorporate that as part of the email notification process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christopher. The next one is, would we be able to see these use cases within a demo environment? I like some of the concepts, however, debuts of them in the wild as such. Dubious of them in the wild as such.
I'm sure we can put them in the demo environment. Actually, Chris owns the demo environment. So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
So we can definitely incorporate that part of the demo environment. We're looking to be more use case centric when it comes to Azure Sentinel. So please expect more use cases being added to the demo environment.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. There's no more new questions coming in, and we can wrap this up here. I have some things, a few reminders before we end the call. So our next scheduled Azure Sentinel webinars are March 4th. We have the RSA recap, and then on March 18, we have a deep dive in threat intelligence. And for details and registrations, these are the same links I have posted earlier. If you go to aka.ms/security webinars, you'll have all the what's upcoming and the recordings as well. Please note that the registration links for the March webinars are not available yet, and we'll have them ready by early next week. In case we missed to answer your question, or if you have additional questions, you can visit us on our Azure Sentinel forum at aka.ms/Azure Sentinel community. I know one of the folks here was asking if they can get a hold via phone to our support team and such on, but this would be the best way to start engaging our engineers at the Azure Sentinel forum. And I want to thank all of those who helped answering the questions. Thank you, Kara, for an awesome presentation. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.